One day, Mia Harper woke up with a sharp ache running through her leg. She rubbed it gently, hoping it would ease with a little movement, but the discomfort lingered stubbornly. It was strange how something so minor could feel so heavy, especially on a morning that should have been calm and ordinary. Her apartment was quiet, almost too quiet, and she realized once again how much the silence of the house mirrored the quiet that had settled in her heart over the past months. Ethan, her husband, was always busy. Long hours at work, constant calls, and never enough time for her. She loved him, of course, but lately, the distance had been harder to ignore. Mia let out a soft sigh, glancing around the living room. The sunlight spilled through the blinds in streaks across the hardwood floor, highlighting the dust on the shelves and the untouched coffee cup on the table. Her leg throbbed as she tried to shift her weight, and finally, with a reluctant determination, she decided to do something she rarely allowed herself: call a professional masseur. She wasn't used to having someone come to her apartment for anything so personal, but the ache made the hesitation irrelevant. She picked up her phone and searched for nearby services, her thumb hovering over one listing in particular. Liam Brooks arrived about half an hour later. The doorbell rang, and Mia hesitated for a brief moment before opening it. He was taller than she expected, with a calm confidence that seemed to fill the hallway as soon as he stepped inside. "Hi, I'm Liam. I'll be helping you today," he said, his voice warm but professional. There was a friendliness there that immediately put her at ease. Mia smiled, feeling an unexpected flutter of curiosity. She led him to the living room, gesturing for him to set up. He moved with ease, almost like he had done this countless times before, placing his bag gently on the floor and arranging his oils and towels neatly. Mia watched him out of the corner of her eye, feeling a strange mixture of relief and nervous anticipation. This was a new experience for her, someone touching her in such a focused, attentive way. As he prepared the massage table, she tried to focus on the practical side of it: the pain in her leg, the muscles that needed loosening. "Let's start with your leg," Liam said softly. "Just relax, and tell me if anything feels uncomfortable." His hands were warm as they moved over her thigh, pressing lightly at first, and then gradually applying more pressure. Mia found herself letting out a small breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The tension in her leg began to melt, and for a moment, it was like the ache had never existed. There was a strange comfort in the way Liam worked. He didn't rush, and he seemed genuinely attentive to her reactions. Every now and then, his eyes would meet hers, just briefly, before returning to the massage. It wasn't anything overt, nothing that crossed any professional boundaries, but it was enough to make Mia acutely aware of the warmth that seemed to radiate from him. She shifted slightly, trying to focus on the sensation of relief rather than the flutter in her chest. As the minutes passed, Mia realized she was enjoying more than just the massage. There was something soothing about Liam's presence, his easy smile, the subtle way he adjusted the pressure just right, even the calm tone of his voice. She hadn't noticed it before, but it had been a long time since anyone had paid such careful attention to her needs, really noticed her in that way. A small, guilty thought crept in: Ethan never had this kind of patience for her, not lately. "Does this feel okay?" Liam asked after a few moments, tilting his head slightly, his eyes still kind and professional. Mia nodded, her voice caught somewhere between casual and hesitant. "Yes, it's perfect, actually." She let her head fall back slightly, closing her eyes, trying to lose herself in the simple relief of it. The room was warm, the sunlight soft, and for the first time in months, she felt a small sense of peace. Yet, there was something else too. A tension she couldn't quite name, something that wasn't entirely about her leg. It was in the way Liam's fingers traced carefully over her muscles, the way he paused, as if he were aware of every tiny shift of her body. Mia's heart beat a little faster, and she chastised herself silently. It was just a massage. Just professional attention. There was nothing else here. She reminded herself of that as she tried to focus on the ache that had brought him to her apartment in the first place. Still, as the session went on, she couldn't ignore the pull of curiosity. She felt seen in a way that went beyond physical relief. Liam's attention was quiet but unmistakable, and it made her feel a warmth that wasn't entirely comfortable, but wasn't unwelcome either. The contrast between the simple human touch she was receiving and the emotional distance she felt from Ethan was impossible to ignore. By the time the massage ended, Mia's leg felt significantly better. She thanked Liam, feeling a bit self-conscious about the lingering awareness of his presence. He packed his things efficiently, offered a polite smile, and said, I hope your leg feels better tomorrow. Don't hesitate to call if you need another session. As the door closed behind him, Mia stood in the living room, her leg no longer aching, but her mind spinning. Something about the visit had unsettled her, in a way that made her feel alive and nervous at the same time. She sank onto the couch, reflecting on the odd mixture of relief and tension that coursed through her. One thing was certain, the day had started with pain in her leg, but it had ended with something far more complicated stirring in her chest, a quiet curiosity, and perhaps, the first spark of something she wasn't sure she was ready to name. Over the next few days, Mia found herself thinking about Liam more than she expected. It wasn't just about the massage, or even the relief her leg had felt, it was the attention, the way he had listened, the subtle warmth of his presence. Every time her phone buzzed, she half hoped it might be him, sending a polite message to check on her leg. She knew it was irrational, he was just doing his job. And yet, the thought brought an unexplainable flutter in her chest. When her leg twinged slightly one evening after a long day, she made a quiet decision. She picked up the phone and called the same number, feeling her pulse quicken. Liam answered promptly, as if he had been expecting her. "Hi, Mia," he said warmly. "How's your leg feeling?" She smiled, a little shyly. "Better, but I think another session wouldn't hurt," she admitted, trying to sound casual. There was a subtle pause, then a soft chuckle on the other side. "Of course. I can come over tomorrow evening if that works." The next evening, when Liam arrived, Mia felt a strange mix of anticipation and guilt. She led him inside, and this time, she noticed the ease with which he moved through her apartment, as though he had been there many times before. There was a familiarity now, a comfort in the rhythm of the session that went beyond mere professionalism. Mia tried to focus on her leg, but she found herself aware of his presence in a way that made her stomach flutter. As Liam worked, the tension in her leg melted again, but it was replaced by a different tension, one she couldn't easily describe. His hands were steady and strong, but gentle. Every movement seemed measured, intentional, yet subtle enough to remain appropriate. Mia felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a realization that her mind was wandering into thoughts she hadn't expected. Thoughts of closeness, of being understood, of being seen. "Tell me if the pressure is too much," Liam said, his voice low and calm. There was a softness in it that made Mia's heart beat faster. She shook her head. "No, it's perfect," she whispered. She caught herself stealing glances at him from under her eyelashes, noticing the way his eyes briefly met hers before returning to his work. There was an intimacy here, not physical in an explicit sense, but in the subtle gestures, the small attentions, the way he seemed to be fully present with her. Mia realized that she was talking more than she usually did. She found herself sharing little things about her day, her frustrations with work, the quiet loneliness that often followed her through the house. Liam listened without interrupting, his expression calm, his hands never faltering in their careful movements. There was something about being listened to so completely that made her heart ache a little. For months, she had longed for someone to truly notice her, to care about the small details, and here it was, unexpected, yet undeniable. At some point, her hand brushed his accidentally while adjusting her position. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but it sent a shiver through her. Liam's hand paused for the tiniest fraction of a second, then moved again, maintaining professionalism but not ignoring the subtle connection. Mia felt a warmth in her chest, a guilty thrill that made her heart race. She reminded herself, this was just a massage. Just a professional session. She repeated it to herself like a mantra, but it did little to ease the tension that had begun to coil quietly between them. Minutes passed, each one stretching with quiet intimacy. Mia became aware of every detail, the warmth of the room, the subtle scent of oils, the way Liam's hand moved with careful precision, and the occasional soft brush of his fingers against her skin that sent a shiver through her. She couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him, the way her body seemed to respond to the smallest gestures. It wasn't overt, it wasn't crossed any lines, but it was there, undeniable and intoxicating. "Almost done," Liam said softly, his voice a gentle anchor in the quiet of the room. Mia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. There was a lingering ache in more than just her leg, a longing she hadn't fully acknowledged before. She realized that this wasn't just about pain relief anymore. It was about connection, attention, the simple human need to be noticed. As the session ended, Liam packed his things carefully, but there was a pause when he looked at her. His gaze lingered, just a moment longer than before, and Mia felt her chest tighten. "I hope you're feeling better," he said, his tone carrying a warmth that went beyond professionalism. Mia nodded, suddenly shy. "I do, thank you, Liam," she replied softly. The words felt small, inadequate for the storm of emotions stirring inside her. After he left, Mia sat quietly on the couch, her leg feeling better but her mind racing. She couldn't stop thinking about him, the way he had made her feel seen, the gentle attentions, the warmth of his presence. A part of her felt guilty for the thoughts that had crept into her mind, yet another part felt exhilarated. She was aware now, more than ever, of the distance that had grown between her and Ethan. The contrast was sharper, almost painful in its clarity. Mia realized that what she felt was complicated. It wasn't just attraction, it was desire for attention, for connection, for someone who seemed to care about her in a way she hadn't realized she missed so deeply. She took a deep breath, letting herself feel the tension without judgment, acknowledging that life had a way of presenting unexpected emotions. Liam had awakened something inside her, something she couldn't quite name, and it both excited and frightened her. The night stretched on, and Mia finally rose to move toward the window. She watched the city lights twinkle in the distance, a quiet smile playing on her lips. She knew that things had changed, subtly but irrevocably. Her heart felt lighter in some ways, yet heavier in others. She had experienced something rare, a connection, gentle but powerful, and she was unsure where it would lead. One thing was certain, her world had shifted, and nothing would feel quite the same again. The days that followed carried a strange rhythm I had never known before. My mornings began with the same routine, coffee brewing in the kitchen, David leaving early with a distracted kiss on my cheek, and the house falling into its heavy silence. But now, there was something new lingering in my thoughts. I found myself listening for footsteps outside, waiting for that knock on the door, or glancing through the window to see if Ethan might pass by. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was something deeper, something that lived in the small spaces of my day. I started noticing details about him that I hadn't before, the way his hands moved when he worked, the quiet focus in his eyes, the warmth of his smile when he allowed himself to show it. Those details etched themselves into my mind, growing heavier with each passing moment. One afternoon, I saw him walking by, and without thinking, I called out his name. He turned, hesitant as always, but when he stepped closer, I felt my heart skip in a way that embarrassed me. I asked him if he had time for tea, and he nodded, almost shyly, as though the invitation itself was something fragile. We sat across from each other at the small wooden table in my kitchen. I poured the tea, my hands trembling slightly though I tried to hide it. Our conversation was simple. He told me a little about his family, his studies, his plans. But beneath those words, there was a current I couldn't ignore. Every time his gaze met mine, I felt a warmth spread through me, a warmth I hadn't felt in years. There was a moment when our hands brushed as I passed him the sugar, and the touch lingered longer than it should have. It was nothing, really, just skin against skin, but it sent a shiver through me. I pulled my hand back quickly, trying to laugh it off, but inside I was shaken. That single touch had said more than an entire conversation could. I told myself again and again that it was harmless. But harmless things don't make your heart race when you're alone in bed at night, replaying every look, every word, every brush of the hand. Harmless things don't make you choose your clothes more carefully before stepping outside, hoping he might notice. Harmless things don't make you feel alive when you had almost forgotten what it meant. It wasn't long before our moments together grew longer. Sometimes he helped me carry groceries in, sometimes he stayed just a little too long after fixing something around the house. And each time, the silence between us grew heavier, filled with something unsaid yet undeniably present. One evening, as the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, we found ourselves walking together down the quiet street. The world felt softer somehow, the air heavy with the kind of stillness that invites confessions. I told him how I often felt invisible, how years of marriage had made me question if I was still the same woman I once was. He listened, really listened, without judgment or interruption. And when he finally spoke, his words were simple but pierced straight into me. "You're not invisible," he said softly. "You're more present than you realize." I didn't know how to respond. My throat tightened, and I could only look away, because in that moment I knew exactly what was happening. My heart was leaning toward him, and every rational thought I had was losing its grip. That night, I sat awake while David slept beside me, his steady breathing filling the room. I stared at the ceiling, torn between guilt and longing. I hadn't crossed any line physically, but my heart had already betrayed him. I had already begun giving pieces of myself to someone else, and the weight of it pressed heavily against me. The next time Ethan came by, the air between us was different. It wasn't just unspoken tension anymore, it was something undeniable. We sat close on the couch, talking quietly about nothing and everything, and there was a moment when his arm brushed against mine. Neither of us moved away. I could feel the warmth radiating from him, and I let myself lean just slightly closer, almost without realizing it that I knew it was dangerous, but I didn't pull back. For years, I had been starved of touch, of closeness, of intimacy that was more than just routine. And here it was, tempting me in the most subtle yet powerful way. When our eyes met, the world seemed to pause. There was no kiss, no grand gesture, just a look, long and unbroken, that said everything we couldn't. In that silence, I felt exposed, vulnerable, but also more alive than I had in a long time. My pulse quickened, and for a moment, I almost forgot to breathe, and yet, the guilt didn't vanish. It lingered, waiting for me in the quiet moments after Ethan left. I found myself caught between two lives, the one I had built with David, safe and predictable but empty, and the one I was secretly creating with Ethan, thrilling but dangerous. Martha noticed it again one afternoon when we met for coffee. She leaned across the table, her eyes sharp, and asked if there was someone else. I froze, almost spilling my cup, before shaking my head too quickly. But she saw it in my face, in the hesitation I couldn't hide. She didn't push, though. She simply sighed and said, "Be careful, Clara. Temptation always feels sweet, but it leaves a bitter aftertaste." Her words echoed in my mind long after, but they didn't stop me. By then, it was too late. I had already crossed a line in my heart, a line I couldn't erase. I told myself I could still control it, that I wouldn't let it go further, but deep down, I knew control was slipping through my fingers. The truth was simple: I wanted Ethan. Not just his presence, not just his quiet comfort, I wanted the way he made me feel. Desired. Seen. Alive, and in that wanting, I knew I was risking everything.